being authentic really means figuring out what you like, not what somebody else likes or not what somebody else has told you should do. But
Right, right. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. In any intimate relationship, we want two things, which paradoxically seem to be at odds with each other. We want to belong to ourselves, that is, to have autonomy, and we want to belong to someone else. That means, be in relationship with someone. And in many marriages, though, it's easy for one person to fold into the other, and that person ends up losing themselves in the marriage. What we want instead are marriages where there is more authenticity. We want marriages where we can be real with our spouse and ourselves and own our desires while building a marriage worth getting excited about. Authentic marriages have more honesty, freedom, and a much more satisfying sex life. My guest today is Amber Price. She is a mom-turned-graduate student, and she has a cool story behind that, how that came to be, sharing what she's learned about creating a more real and authentic marriage for herself. I learned a lot of great things from Amber, which you're about to hear, such as how to be more aware of how authentic your relationship really is, seeing yourself more clearly so you can be less biased in how you process various situations that happen, and understanding when your behavior is driven by seeking validation from others versus something more authentic within you. Speaking of building authentic relationships, have you heard about our upcoming virtual lovemaking retreat called Next Level Loving? It takes place on June 9th and 10th, which is coming right up. And you join us over Zoom, but don't worry, you're not on camera. And this is different from our other in-person retreats we do. This retreat focuses more on sex, technique, pleasure, passion, and deep connection during sex. It's kind of a retreat where you and your spouse will want to get a hotel room or send the kids to grandma's house for the weekend and join us live via Zoom webinar. Emily and I will guide you through practices and exercises designed to enhance your lovemaking. You can join us in 3 sessions, Friday night, then Saturday morning, and then Saturday night, where each session builds on the previous one. We give you fun and easy and sexy homework after each session, which kind of builds on itself too. We teach you skills to help carry the positive energy beyond the weekend as well. As a reminder, it's coming up on June 9th at 10, and you need to register. You can register on the website at getyourmarriageon.com. If you can't join us live for those exact dates, you can still sign up anyway and get a copy of the video recordings and then pick another time for you two to get your marriage on. And now let's go meet Amber Price. Amber Price, welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. How are you today?
I am doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I'm really excited about this topic. And the more I've gotten to know you, you're just a really authentic person. I just want to ask, have you always been that way?
No, that's a good question. I don't know that any of us are always authentic, right? It's always going to be a developmental process, and that's good. It's a process through life. But a handful of years ago, it's maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, really had a moment that kind of stopped me on a dime and turned my mind towards things that I needed to work on in my life. So it was a Saturday afternoon. I can still see myself. Like I can see the exact spot I was standing in my kitchen, right next to the kitchen table. And I was mopping my kitchen floor, just doing the normal Saturday chores of the day. But I noticed in myself that day that I was feeling really grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I noticed that often on Saturdays, I was feeling really grumpy.
This is a pattern.
Yes. And what I realized is that I was feeling grumpy in that moment because somebody in my house was grumpy. It may have been like multiple people in the house, right? We make our kids do chores on Saturdays. They don't love it. So they're usually grumpy. Or maybe my husband was having a bad day. I don't know. But somebody was grumpy. And I realized in that moment that I was always allowing other people's moods to impact what I was choosing to do. And maybe that's common as the mom of the house. I felt responsible for facilitating everybody else's well-being. But it really was a moment where I was like, wait, this isn't working out very well. And actually I started to notice just how often I was grumpy with the people in my life that were the most important to me. And so that kind of started me down a path of saying, I really need to confront some things in myself Because I did feel in some ways like I'm the common denominator here, right? Like if my
Uh-huh.
relationships with my husband feel strained and my kids and my friends, I'm the common denominator.
Uh,
So I must have some things I need to confront in myself.
uh-huh.
Which just really started me down a path of kind of seeking sources that could help me on personal growth and things like that. Ultimately led me here's actually a little story too that I'm just now thinking of. It was about a year later, I made September my get out of your comfort zone month. I decided
Oh, great idea. Uh-huh.
and, I just thought I would do little things. So I started out like, "Oh, I'll go try a new class at the gym." I went to spin at the gym. Didn't love it, but I tried it, right?
Right.
I said yes to leading the music at church, even though I've never done that, and I really have no desire to do that. Just little things like that.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
by the end of the month, I had applied to go back to grad school, which I did
Oh,
not see coming.
whoa. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Kind of big changes, but starting out
Mhm.
small and just stretching myself, and it just kind of has put me on a path of developing who I am and feeling more comfortable with who I am, and then that's the exact thing that I've ended up studying in grad school and what I try to help others get on that path also.
Gotcha. So, what would you say is the opposite of authentic then?
I guess maybe there's a couple of things. Definitely
Mhm.
doing things that you think other people want you to do. I don't think we realize how pervasive that is in our world today. We
Mhm.
sort of know that we do a lot of comparison or that we, try to live up to other people's expectations, but the research shows we do it almost constantly, especially
A
the comparison thing.
Any examples from your life of where you found yourself comparing?
I mean, again, going back to the mom thing, because this is a big reality for a lot of moms, right? And I think this probably applies for dads too. There's always the standard of this is what a good mom does. So in
Mhm.
my mind, I'm trying to live up to these good mom standards that I think the world has for me. Oh, I've got to have a healthy meal on the table and my house needs to be clean and I definitely shouldn't have a pile of laundry sitting in the corner and my kids need to be in all the best activities and getting great grades and I need to be smiling and happy all the time. I mean, I could go on and on, right?
Yes, uh-huh,
We
uh-huh.
all feel that. But when we're trying to live up to these expectations that we think other people have for us, we're not being authentic at all to who we actually are, unless we're choosing those things for ourselves.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Where do you think these messages come from?
They're literally everywhere around us. I heard somebody once say it's like they're in the air we breathe, and they are.
Uh-huh.
So much of it is media, right? We see portrayed happy
Mhm.
families and idealistic things, social media, TV, everything. It's even in the conversations we have with our friends, though. You might hear a friend saying something that she does that works well, and you
Uh-huh.
think, "Oh, I don't do that." We're just almost programmed to just compare ourselves constantly.
Mhm. Like our brains, we are great evaluation machines,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what
And
they
it
do.
can be good because we learn about ourselves
Right.
through
When it's
interaction.
applied correctly, yeah.
Yeah, but we have to be really careful of watching ourselves in those moments.
So, in general, I think women are very nurturing by nature, and that's one of their gifts. But at what times does it become a liability?
Yeah, that is a big question with a lot of answers, but, women are very nurturing, and I think part of that probably is gifts, and part of that is some of this expectations that we've just said. They're kind of taught also to be nurturing, and even from as a young little girl, girls tend to see themselves in relation to others. I kind of love this example, but a kindergarten age girl, for example, if you ask her to draw a picture of herself or of something that describes herself, she'll often put other people into the picture because she sees herself as a daughter or a sister or a friend, which is
Uh-huh.
a beautiful thing, and it's so sweet.
Mhm.
But it can lend itself to what I would say is another form of being inauthentic, and that is forgetting that of yourself have an identity also, and that it doesn't have to get lost entirely in the roles that you have with other people. It's a wonderful thing to be. I mean, I love being a mom. I love it when I've been known as like Jack's mom or things like that to little
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
The
Uh-huh.
things they love. But when we forget to have ownership of ourselves also, and to develop ourselves, kind of back to my story of the mopping, I was forgetting myself in that. And that breeds all kinds of resentment and overwhelm and exhaustion. And I don't think that that goes just for women. I think men can move into that also, right? I
Mhm.
think it comes almost too naturally for women. They really have to fight it.
I think the men's version of it, or a lot of husbands' version of it, is the happy wife, happy life
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
Like, if their wife is upset, it's my fault.
Yeah.
Like, that's their thinking, and so their emotional state is very much tied to their wife's emotional state. Like,
Yeah.
she's unhappy, he has no right to be happy either, and
Yeah.
so
And that's not helpful for either partner.
no.
Yeah.
So that creates relationships that are very entangled
Yeah.
emotionally,
Yeah.
and we see
Emotional
a lot
fusion
of
is
that.
what
Yeah,
I've
emotional fusion.
researched and things with that.
Great. How do couples move or individuals move out of fusion into more healthy interdependence?
Oh, it is a process and a journey. So if you see yourself doing this, you don't need to feel bad. You need to know that you're normal, but taking steps in that direction is really helpful. I mean, we're talking about authenticity, but a really related word is autonomy.
Okay.
So I love the concept of autonomy. I think sometimes autonomy gets a bad rap. We
Mhm.
think sometimes that it means disconnecting from other people or being fiercely independent or just shunning other people's opinions. And that's really not what autonomy is. Autonomy is more of being intentional about who you are and having ownership of your own choices and deliberately seeking connection, but also getting to develop yourself. Those are all things we want for ourselves, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Sometimes I even think of it as like, if you think of a 2-year old or a 3-year old, which
Mhm.
we all know 2-year olds and 3-year olds, and they
Uh-huh.
really want to learn to do it themselves.
Uh-huh.
They want to tie their shoes or they want to buckle themselves into their own car seat and they're going to throw a tantrum if they don't get to, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Drives us crazy, but we want that for them also. We want
Right.
them to develop. And then even like a teenager is really, really pushing the autonomy piece, right? Like,
Yes.
I want to make choices for myself. I want to develop who I am. And again, I have almost all teenagers right now. I have 4 boys in there between 11 and 19. So,
Nice. Uh-huh.
and they definitely are wanting to do things for themselves. And sometimes I'm like, but if you just listen to me and the way I want you to do it, things would work out.
Mhm.
But I don't really want that for them. I want them to develop who they are. I want that autonomy piece for them. And I think we all relate to that, right? Like we know that our kids need that. I think that as we get older, sometimes we as adults start to think, no, I'm not supposed to have that. I don't know that we deliberately think, no, I'm not supposed to have autonomy, but we sort of believe that, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm really just supposed to lose myself in serving others.
Right.
And somehow we decide that autonomy piece doesn't matter. But I don't think we would have wanted that for ourselves when we were younger, or we wouldn't look at our kids and think, boy, I sure hope you lose who you are when you get older.
Right. Or they think marriage is an exception to all that. I
Yeah.
right. I'm supposed to lose myself and not be a self in this marriage
Yeah.
because I'm married or whatever.
Yeah. But if you've lost yourself in your marriage, then who's the other person married to? Like
And no
there's
one.
no one to
Right.
connect with. So that's
Uh-huh.
not valuable at all for anybody.
Yeah. Let's apply this all to this is a sex podcast. We
Mhm.
talk about healthy sexuality. How does all this apply in the bedroom?
Yeah.
What are the problems that happen? Let's say, let's start there.
Okay, well, let's start then with the
Uh-huh.
going back to the women's kind of relational nature. That can
Yeah.
be such a big one because so many women kind of societally are taught that sex is kind of the man's domain. He'll know what to do. He'll take care of my needs.
Mhm.
Or I'm doing it for him. I'm just here to please him. In fact, there's
Yes.
research that shows that women will report being sexually satisfied, not if they are actually orgasming or feeling sexually satisfied, but if he is.
Okay.
Um,
Uh-huh.
that's not authentic. That's
Uh-huh.
not, I don't think men want that either, right? That's not what the man wants out of the relationship. He wants to bring her pleasure and help her enjoy the experience too. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, absolutely. I
dy-
think an aspect of male sexuality is a lot of men are genuinely excited when their wife is excited.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, too often we can move into that losing yourself, especially as women. But again, as men also, I think sometimes men feel maybe ashamed of their sexual desires or their sexual nature. They feel like they've got to stifle it if they're the higher desire partner, which I realize they're not always, but
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
when they are, they just may have a lot of angst around that desire and things if it's not being met and matched by the lower desire partner. But it's, I think, critical to know that that's a normal part of a relationship too, right? You're always gonna
Right.
have a higher desire and a lower desire partner.
Right.
Not broken if you do. It's
Uh-huh.
just an opportunity to grow, and that is gonna develop authenticity if you are willing to do it together, to work through it in an emotionally mature way.
Gotcha. Amber, I wanna ask you a a question might make you feel a little vulnerable, but I want to ask you, where have you developed sexually as you like contrast where you are now to where you
Yeah.
used to be?
Yeah,
Or
I
let's
mean,
maybe think about like what were some of the messages you had as a child or absorbed from the culture or whatever
yeah,
that didn't help you build a more intimate
so
relationship?
so many.
Uh-huh.
Come from all different sources, right? A lot of them are from, like, family, but also religion, just kind of this idea of
Uh-huh.
bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. Oh, now you're married, sex is good, and how do you bridge that gap? That's
Right.
a challenge, right? But,
Uh-huh.
I really, really had internalized the message that a woman just engages in a sexual relationship to keep her husband happy.
I
It's
see.
really about him, that he's got needs and you fulfill them and then you move on with your life.
Mhm.
And so we spent a lot of years in that mindset and kind of knowing it wasn't working, but also like it was just almost felt natural to us. So
Didn't
when
know any
it,
different. Right.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
so I think though, kind of in the back of my mind, I always knew this was something I was going to need to address in myself. I do think I needed to be in the right place in
Mhm.
order to do that. And, going back to the mop in the kitchen, that was kind of a turning point for me in my life of saying, it's time for me to develop myself in a lot of ways. And one of those was taking a better look at my sexual relationship and what do I need to improve there. And
Mhm.
a lot of that was exactly what we've been talking about is it can be so easy for women to have no idea what you like or what I have no idea what my desires are. How am I even supposed to know that? So taking the time to actually figure that out, that's a
Mhm.
process, but it's an important process.
Gotcha. What was that process like for you?
I mean, I guess it's important to say too, it's an ongoing process,
Uh,
right? It's
right. Uh-huh.
not the same from one day to the next, but just allowing time to be spent on myself. And I think this is true for all women I mean, a woman's body takes longer to become aroused and to orgasm and things like that. And so you have to be able to spend that time on yourself. And that doesn't always come naturally to a woman.
Right. Why is that so hard for women to like be the center
Yeah.
of the attention?
Yeah. We're just used to taking care of other people. And there's always a long to-do list too, right? So why do I
Right.
want to take a long time? Like I've got
Uh-huh.
things to get done. So that can be hard to be present in that moment. And I'm the kind of person and I know I'm not alone in this, that my brain is like, if my brain's a computer, I've got 25 tabs open
Yes.
any given time.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
shut all of those down and be present is always a challenge. Always
Any
a challenge.
anything practical that's helped you even a little bit with
Yeah.
that challenge?
Yeah. So I'm currently working on a PhD and my advisor studies sexual mindfulness actually.
Mhm.
And so I've definitely learned a lot from her, but one of the things is awareness, and that is just when you catch your mind spiraling into the to-do list and, "Oh, I need to get this at the grocery store. I wonder what my kids are," whatever. Just pulling your mind back without judgment, without saying, "Oh, I'm so bad at this," but, just pulling your mind back and saying, "Wait, I'm here right now. What am I feeling right now?" Just paying attention to, like, what is my body physically feeling right now, that can really help bring you back to the moment.
That is so good. That is so good. What else could women do to develop their sexuality?
Let me talk a little bit about some of the aspects of authenticity because I think those can tie in to that question. So, this is like from a research standpoint, they kind of divide authenticity into four aspects.
Categories? Okay.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And the first one is awareness, which we kind of just talked about, but it's from a non sexual standpoint, it's just knowing who you are, what you like,
Mhm.
I'm aware of who I am. And I think we already touched on this, but being aware of your own desires is a huge part of being able to show up authentically in a sexual relationship. The second part is they call it unbiased processing, which is just knowing that I know who I am, but I also know I have weaknesses and challenges. I can see myself clearly and I don't need somebody else to make me feel good about that or anything. Sometimes authenticity gets misconstrued also as my way or the highway. I am who I am. You have to accept me. But that's not genuinely being authentic. Being authentic is saying, I am who I am and I am flawed and that's okay. And I'm going to work on those things. So if you put that in a sexual context, instead of pointing fingers at the other person and saying, you're making it hard for me because of XYZ, or you're broken, we need to fix you, which
Uh-huh.
can be a dynamic, saying, what am I doing? What do I need to work on? What would make it challenging to be in a sexual relationship with me? Taking that time to kind of reflect on that can move you in a direction of better connection with your partner and things.
Great.
And then the third aspect is behavior, which is simply acting like yourself, which I think that's hard enough to do outside the bedroom. Inside the bedroom, it really can be a challenge to we've got these voices in our minds, whether it's what media has portrayed that sex is supposed to look like, or
Uh-huh.
messages that we've learned through our childhood, whatever. Getting those out of our mind and actually being able to be ourselves with our partner in a sexual relationship is not the easiest thing, right?
Right, right.
But I think if you can kind of start to pay attention to like, am I being me or am I being what media told me I was supposed to be like right now?
Right, right. Uh-huh.
Um, Yeah.
And as you say that, I think of a conversation my wife and I had recently, reminiscing on one of our, really good sexual experiences.
Hmm.
And it's going into the encounter, we kind of set some ground rules where she was going to go first and then I was going to go second. But
Okay.
but when she's going, she had full permission to ask for whatever it is in the moment that she wanted or needed, and I was going to do my best to do that. Of course, if she asked for something I'm really uncomfortable with, that we won't do that. But like the idea was to give herself full permission to kind of embody herself and just go with the flow in the moment, what
Wow.
what it felt like.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. And then, then we switched and then it was my turn. And it was so different having sex when it's not about managing another person. You're
Hmm.
not about like, is this gonna hurt their feelings or like, am I taking too long?
Yeah.
Because that was totally off the table now. Because it's like I could just really be myself and just bask in my wife's beauty. Or when it was my turn, I could just really be myself and just enjoy what felt great in that moment. Okay, now let's try this. Okay, let's move
Yeah.
this way. And so it was just a really fun way to
I love that.
like what you said about that behavior, right? So
Yeah.
really step into being yourself and we're able to relax in it.
Yeah.
And if you can relax in sex, I think it just makes it so much more meaningful and
Yeah.
just deeper connection.
Well, and I love that you said you like had these ground rules ahead of time. So you had the conversation and given each other permission for this. And
Uh-huh.
that could probably really help with the authenticity, right? Like I know what each other is expecting of the experience. And so I can really just let down my guard and just be,
Right.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe role play is something that you enjoy in your sexual relationship.
Uh-huh.
Great. If that's authentic to you and your relationship, then do it. Maybe it's not. That's okay.
Mhm.
Any number of things in a sexual relationship. Being authentic really means figuring out what you like, not what somebody else likes or not what somebody else has told you you should do, but
Right,
figuring out
right.
what you like and then experience it.
Yeah, I like that. Do you like role play? Do you like dirty talk? Do you like something more quiet and sensual?
Yeah.
Do you like something more, I don't know, adventurous
Yeah.
or
Or fast versus slow or
yeah, uh-huh.
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay, I think that
Well,
was the 3
yeah,
things.
that was
What's
the
the
third one.
4th
You
part?
discovered the
Uh-huh.
fourth, exactly. It's just the relational orientation, and what you said about not managing each other is exactly that, right? Like,
Mhm.
an authentic person can engage in a relationship in a healthy and connected way, and that is exactly what you said, not feeling like, "Oh, I've gotta be validated by the other person that I'm doing it well," or things, just being in that moment and connecting. It and your story was exactly that, so
That's so good. Do people where they're emotionally fused, as you
yeah.
said,
Yeah.
do some people trying to grow out of that, the pendulum swings way to the opposite end of the spectrum, where in the attempt to no longer be fused, they're more, I don't know, toxically
Yeah, I d
independent? What does that look like?
That's a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that question.
John Wayning everything? Like, in the attempt to be more, I don't know, less like, I can see maybe a mom, not you, but in the kitchen, rage cleaning, like, I'm grumpy for everyone. And then it kinda goes to the opposite extreme where it's like, "No, I'm not gonna do anything for anyone anymore."
Yeah.
And
I
I
I
er
admit that I have a hard
Uh-huh.
time seeing a woman actually doing that because it's
Huh.
so ingrained in us to continue to care for other people, but I could be
Uh-huh.
wrong. I kind of love the idea of balance. I mean, balance is hard, but it's always about balance, right? And so there's relationships and there's autonomy, and those two things ideally get balanced right in the middle. Um,
Mhm.
I've
But you
always
can't but too much autonomy
right, yeah,
is
it's
harm
not a great
yeah.
thing. No,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say I'd love to think about, I think they were called pogo balls. I don't know, do you know what a pogo ball is? I'm thinking, like, back in the 1980s, but I'm imagining a ball that's got, like, a disc that goes around the middle that you can
Uh-huh.
stand on. So it's a ball it looks like Saturn maybe.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
You're
okay, yeah,
standing
yeah.
on the edges,
Uh-huh.
and but, always trying to balance that, right? And if you were standing on that, you'd be, like, flopping one way or the other, and, anyway,
Uh-huh.
the perfect balance would be you would be, able to have relationships and be yourself in that context. That is always going to be a challenge. And for some people, it's going to be, I need to work on my autonomy. And some people, it's going to be, I need to work on the relationship.
That is so good. Great.
And that may change from one day to the next. There might be days where you're like, I have really, really been self centered today. I need to sway more towards
Mm.
relationships. And there may be days that go the opposite.
Okay, so Amber, we've been talking about where we kind of have a lack of autonomy ourselves, like authenticity for ourselves. But in what ways do individuals kind of restrict the autonomy of their spouse?
Yeah.
Like, how do we hold our spouse back from them developing sexually?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I like the way you worded that. I think that a lot of times, like, we definitely know that taking away somebody else's autonomy in sex is not great, right? Like, that's assault or abuse. And I don't think we're trying to do that, generally speaking.
Hmm.
I wonder if sometimes we're doing it without fully recognizing that we're doing it. For example, and I'll use classic gendered stereotypes here, but it can go either way. But if a man, for example, is like, I know what'll get her in the mood. I'm going to do the dishes and fold the laundry and, clean the kitchen. Now she owes me sex. If that's the mindset,
Uh-huh.
her autonomy is gone, right? Now she's got in her mind, whether she wants to or not, she's supposed to have sex. She's almost being treated like a vending machine, right? Like
Yes.
put this
Uh-huh.
in and out comes sex. That's not autonomous sex. And that's not going to be good for either person then, right? If she's
Hmm.
not choosing it, he's not going to enjoy it as much either. I think sometimes on the flip side, and again, gendered stereotypes and it can go either way, but if she is saying yes to sex because it's easier to just say yes to avoid the conflict that may come, or if she's saying yes to sex to feel like she's a good wife, which we had talked about a little bit already, that's not autonomous sex either, right? She's lost her sense of autonomy in that. And again, it's not going to be the connective, authentic sexual experience that you're probably looking for.
Right. Right. Right.
I think again, and we touched on this, but anytime you're stifling your own sexual desires, like, oh, I'd like to have sex, but oh, I'm ashamed that I want to have sex.
Hmm.
Autonomy out the window again, right? There's no ownership of who you are. Um,
Hmm.
anytime you're doing it because you're looking for reassurance that you're loved.
Hmm.
Now that one is a tricky one, right? Because sex can provide that connection and that feeling of love, and that's great. But
Hmm.
if you're doing it explicitly for the sake of feeling like, reassure me, validate me that you love me still, now you've crossed over into non-autonomous sex.
Looks like the pattern here is like a little bit of dependence.
Yeah.
Like you're depending on your spouse to be a certain way so that I feel okay to be a certain way.
Yeah.
That's kind of the running theme I'm picking up from
Yeah.
everything you're teaching.
Yeah. And it's less connective when it's like that, right? We want to be in a relationship where both people are like, yes, I want to engage in this with you. I want to enjoy this experience with you. Let's be ourselves. Let's,
Hmm.
build this connection with each other.
Right, right.
It's
Yeah,
always a challenge.
that's good. That's good. It's reminded me of one of my recent conflicts in my marriage too around sex, where there's a certain sexual act I want to try. My wife doesn't. And therefore, I turn into Eeyore.
Yeah.
Right. Right? Like, things are falling apart, this is never gonna go anywhere, but that doesn't serve anybody here, and again, it's like I'm dependent on my wife doing or agreeing to something
Yeah.
for me to manage my own emotional
Yeah.
states.
Well,
That
and you
that keeps
pressure
us
her.
fused,
Yeah,
or
you
enmeshed or
pressure her
whatever.
on that then. It'd be easier to just do it and then he won't do the Eeyore thing.
Yes,
And
yeah,
that's
she's even said that, like, "Maybe I'll just give in," or whatever. It's like, but then again, I know that's not what I really want, right? It's
yeah.
about that, so
I actually was teaching last week kind of a sex seminar for young adults, and one kid raised his hand and said, "I hear you saying that you need to be authentic to your own desires, know what your desires are, not stifle your desires, but also that you need to let your partner have their desires. And how in the world do you do that?" And I was like, "That is the question of a lifetime, right?"
you figure it out,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
There's
but I love the concept that that's what a sexual relationship is to work through challenges. It's supposed to be challenging
Mhm,
to get through this. And when you can have emotional maturity and patience and forgiveness and commitment and all those important things, then you work together through it and you can grow through it. And
right,
then you'll probably face another challenge down the road, but that's okay because you can grow through that too.
right, right. How important is honesty in all of this?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, doesn't honesty sound a lot like authenticity? Like
It does.
really,
Uh-huh.
I'm just showing you who I am. I'm telling you who I am. I'm being who I am. I'm not hiding anything from you.
Is it possible to be authentic and honest without being an ogre about it or being a bully about it?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think those things absolutely go together because that relational orientation piece of authenticity is like, it's not my way or the highway. It's I am who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am, and I'm willing to allow you to also be who you are
Mhm.
and to show up. And again, I'm not going to finger point and blame you. I'm going to reflect on myself and develop myself. And if both partners are doing that, then we're on a path to something good, right?
Mhm. That takes a lot of character, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
And
character for that.
forgiveness. And forgiveness is
Mhm.
one of my favorite parts of marriage because I screw up as a wife all the time. And I'm so glad that my husband will forgive me. And it goes
Mhm.
both ways, you know?
Mhm. So, Amber, you probably don't know I'm about to ask you this, but I wanna know, what are your black belt sex tips? We talked about being more authentic in our relationships, bringing more honesty, and allowing more autonomy, and less fusion, which I love. Now, let's say you're working on that as a couple. Things are getting better, you're developing your sexuality. I wanna hear your tips on how you can take sex to the next level.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good question. And I think do all of these things that we've talked about. Just take those
Mhm.
baby steps in the right direction. Give yourself grace. Know that you're going to fall short. All of
Mhm.
that is fine. But I recently was talking to a friend, and I this is not something I had realized a handful of years ago, and it definitely wasn't something she had realized. But as a woman, if you can get a vibrator, and if your husband is okay with that, that will just even the playing field a lot because all of a
Uh-huh.
sudden it's not going to take nearly as long. A quickie is not a thing for a woman unless you can, have an easy access to an orgasm for her too, and a vibrator will help that a lot.
Yes, yes. I
So I
think
just think it allows that connection to just happen easier without all the frustrations that can.
mhm. Yeah, they're wonderful inventions. Definitely God inspired. Yes. Good.
Yes.
Any other tips you wanna share?
No, I guess my last tip would just be that reminder that it's challenging, but it's supposed to be challenging, and you can grow through it and develop connection as you work together through it. Give yourself grace, be patient with the process, and just have fun and enjoy the journey.
Great. Very good. Where can people go to learn more about you, your work, and, follow you?
Yeah, so I have a website, amberaprice.com, and my work is more just around authenticity and connection and real intimacy in general. So even, beyond sexual relationship and things, just feeling good about who you are and then building your relationships because you feel good about who you are and not losing who you are. So yeah, my website, I've got some courses and resources there. And then on Instagram at amber.a.price.
Great. That is important. I Googled Amber Price, and
Yeah.
Google auto-suggest said, "Amber Price is right." So I guess
Is
either
that
way,
right?
uh, Amber Price is right. That's right. Something.
Amber A Price.
Yes, very good. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.